Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that almost everything people believe about who a narcissist ends up with is completely wrong? What if the real story is not about them finding someone better, but about you becoming someone stronger? Today, we are going to uncover a reality that many people never get to see. We are looking behind the mask, exposing the cycle they repeat again and again, and revealing an unexpected victory that belongs not to the narcissist, but to the person who finally walked away. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to hear could completely change the way you understand everything you have survived and everything you are growing into. The truth is simple. Narcissists do not end up with their perfect partner. They stay with whoever can protect their illusion for the longest time. Once you understand this, the entire picture of their relationships begins to make sense. Narcissists go through life covered by emotional armor built from deep insecurity, fear of rejection, and an endless need for outside approval. They are not searching for a healthy relationship the way emotionally secure people do. They are not looking for real compatibility, emotional closeness, or lasting trust. Instead, they search for someone who reflects back the version of themselves they desperately want to believe. Their ideal partner is not built on love, it is built on illusion. They choose someone who keeps feeding that illusion without seeing through it. Someone who does not yet notice the hidden cracks beneath the surface. Someone who unknowingly confirms the fantasy that they are exceptional, admired, always right, and impossible to replace. But the moment that fantasy begins to shake, everything starts to change. When a partner begins setting healthy boundaries, asking fair questions, expecting accountability, or noticing the contradictions in their behavior, the narcissist slowly starts to withdraw. Sometimes they become cold. Sometimes they punish with silence. Sometimes they search for someone new. This does not happen because the relationship suddenly became unhealthy. It happens because the illusion can no longer survive. Keep watching because the next part explains why this cycle repeats so often. And once you see it, you will never look at these relationships the same way again. This is exactly why narcissists rarely stay with the strongest, most emotionally aware, or most balanced people for long. Those people eventually recognize what is really happening. They begin to see the manipulation instead of the charm. They stop reacting to unnecessary drama. They stop feeding endless demands for validation. They stop supporting a performance that was never real. The moment the illusion falls apart, the narcissist feels exposed in a way they cannot comfortably handle. Rather than facing that uncomfortable reality, they often leave and search for someone who has not yet recognized the pattern. They move forward not because the new person is better, but because the new person has not yet learned the rules of the game. In the end, the person a narcissist chooses is not selected from genuine love or deep emotional connection. That person is chosen because they help keep a carefully built identity alive. The narcissist is not protecting love. They are protecting an image they feel they cannot survive without. Once you truly understand this, you stop asking why they seemed happier with someone else. Instead, you begin asking a far more powerful question. How long will that illusion last before history repeats itself? The answer is usually predictable because the pattern never really changes. The faces change, the names change, the circumstances change, but the emotional cycle remains almost identical. If this is already opening your eyes, stay with me because the next truth is even more surprising. When you understand that narcissists choose people based on who can maintain their illusion the longest, you also begin to understand why their relationships almost never experience real growth. A narcissist does not move from one deeply meaningful relationship to another. They move from one familiar emotional pattern to the next. At first, everything feels exciting, intense, and almost magical. The attention seems endless. The compliments feel genuine. The connection appears effortless. But beneath that excitement, the same cycle quietly begins. Admiration turns into expectation. Expectation becomes control. Control slowly becomes criticism. Criticism creates emotional distance. Then comes blame, confusion, and eventually replacement. The story repeats with different people, but the ending often looks remarkably similar. They are not creating new relationships. They are replaying the same emotional script with different actors. That is why so many former partners tell nearly identical stories, even though they have never met each other. The details may vary, but the emotional experience feels strangely familiar. Once you recognize the pattern, instead of focusing only on the individual moments, everything starts becoming much clearer. The greatest freedom comes when you stop asking why you were not enough and begin realizing that no one can permanently satisfy a person whose identity depends on illusion instead of truth. That realization is not painful. It is the beginning of real freedom, real healing, and a future that no longer depends on someone else's endless cycle. A narcissist is not chasing real love, personal growth, or deep emotional connection. They are chasing a temporary emotional high, a carefully created fantasy, and the excitement that comes from being admired and placed above everyone else. They want the powerful feeling of being put on a pedestal. They enjoy being seen as extraordinary, irreplaceable, and always deserving of praise. More than anything, they want constant validation without being questioned. Because they keep chasing the exact same emotional reward, they repeat the same relationship pattern with every new person they meet. It almost always begins with intense admiration that quickly sweeps the other person off their feet. The love bombing stage creates what feels like a dream. Every promise sounds sincere. Every compliment feels perfect. Every future plan appears believable. But just like every relationship before it, reality slowly begins to appear. The new partner starts noticing flaws, inconsistencies, and behavior that no longer matches the beautiful image presented at the beginning. That is when the script changes. The criticism starts. Blame becomes more frequent. Emotional distance quietly grows. The narcissist feels disappointed, not because they were deeply hurt, but because the illusion they depended on is beginning to disappear once again. Instead of facing the truth, they often begin searching for someone new, hoping the next person will keep believing the fantasy a little longer. They are not searching for a better ending. They are only trying to delay the same ending that keeps happening. Keep watching, because the next truth explains why this cycle follows them wherever they go, no matter who enters their life. This is why so many of their relationships seem almost identical from the outside. Former partners often describe the same emotional journey, even though they have never spoken to one another. The names are different, the places are different, but the pattern feels strangely familiar. Their relationship history becomes a chain of repeated heartbreaks that they often describe as bad luck or the fault of someone else. The reality is much different. They are not creating lasting love. They are recycling the same illusion again and again until they are willing to face the painful truth hidden inside themselves, something they usually spend years avoiding. The cycle continues regardless of who stands beside them. Once you understand that they are not repeating relationships, but repeating the same emotional script, everything starts making sense. Deep inside, they are not searching for genuine connection. They are searching for control. That is one of the hardest truths for people who truly love them. While you were giving your heart honestly, they were protecting an image. While you were trying to build trust, they were making sure nothing challenged the role they wanted to play. Stay with me, because this next part may completely change how you see the relationship you once believed was built on love. Real intimacy requires honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to let another person see both your strengths and your weaknesses. For a narcissist, that kind of openness feels extremely dangerous. It exposes the hidden insecurities, old emotional wounds, and fragile identity they work so hard to keep hidden. Instead of choosing a partner who encourages authenticity, they usually choose someone who makes them feel emotionally safe by not questioning them too deeply. They are drawn toward relationships where the illusion remains protected. Healthy love asks for accountability, respect, and equal effort from both people. But the narcissist often feels most comfortable in relationships where they control the pace, shape the story, and hold the emotional power. That is why emotionally strong and independent partners eventually become threatening. Someone who sees through the mask cannot easily be controlled. Someone with healthy boundaries refuses to accept manipulation forever. When love becomes real and deeper conversations begin, the narcissist often pulls away because closeness demands honesty, while control depends on distance. Faced with that choice, they usually protect themselves rather than the relationship. The cycle continues exactly as before. They chase admiration instead of intimacy. They choose ego over truth and comfort over growth. Every new relationship becomes another hiding place instead of an opportunity to heal. They fear being fully known far more than they fear being alone. If this is connecting with your experience, keep watching, because the next truth explains why emotionally healthy people eventually leave their world behind. A narcissist rarely ends up with the emotionally strong person who finally outgrows the relationship. That is not because you were lacking or because someone else offered something better. It happens because your growth became a threat to the fragile world they had created. The moment you started healing, asking difficult questions, and recognizing unhealthy patterns, the balance of power changed. You stopped accepting the small pieces of affection that once kept you hoping. You stopped carrying blame that never belonged to you. You stopped allowing their changing moods to decide how you felt about yourself. Whether you realized it at the time or not, you became someone they could no longer control. Confidence exposed their insecurity. Emotional awareness highlighted their emotional immaturity. Your healing quietly revealed truths they had spent years trying to avoid. That reality became uncomfortable for them. Instead of growing alongside you, they often stepped away and searched for someone who had not yet recognized the pattern. Someone who still confused emotional intensity with lasting love. Someone who still believed every promise without questioning it. Your personal growth removed you from their cycle, not because you lost value, but because you gained clarity. You no longer played the role they expected. Once you stopped participating in the script, they could no longer keep you inside the story they were trying to write. That awakening did not push you backward. It moved you toward freedom. And the final truth may be the most important one of all. The person who comes after you is not an upgrade. They are simply the next person helping support an illusion that has not yet fallen apart. You were never replaced because you lacked value. You were replaced because you stopped playing the role they needed you to play. Narcissists are not searching for better partners. They are searching for partners who are easier to influence. They often look for someone who still believes the grand promises, who still falls for overwhelming charm, and who mistakes constant attention for genuine love. From the outside, the new relationship may look exciting, perfect, or even enviable. But remember everything you now understand. They are not building something completely new. They are repeating the exact same storyline with a different person. What appears to be an upgrade is simply the opening chapter of a story you have already lived. It begins with love bombing, intense attention, endless promises, and emotional excitement. Then the familiar pattern slowly returns until confusion, disappointment, and pain take its place once again. The difference now is that you can finally see the cycle clearly. You no longer need to chase answers or compare yourself to anyone else. Your future is no longer controlled by their choices. It is shaped by your own healing, your own truth, and your ability to build relationships based on honesty instead of illusion. They did not replace you with someone better. They replaced you with someone who has not yet discovered what you eventually learned. And that understanding is one of the greatest forms of freedom you will ever experience. The person who comes after you is not living a better story than you were. In time, they are likely to face the same confusion, the same emotional manipulation, and the same exhausting cycle that begins with idealization and slowly turns into devaluation. That is exactly why your healing journey matters so much. You broke free from the illusion. You stepped outside their control and left the world they carefully created for you. You chose reality instead of fantasy. The new person is not experiencing a happier ending. They are simply reading the first chapters of a story you have already finished. A narcissist does not truly move on to something better. They simply restart the same illusion, hoping this version lasts a little longer than the last one. They rarely realize that the real problem has never been the people they choose. The real problem is the person they refuse to become. Once you recognize that every so-called fresh start is really the same old cycle wearing a different face, everything begins to make much more sense. Stay with me, because the next truth ties every piece together. At the center of almost every new relationship is one simple reality. The person a narcissist ends up with is usually someone who has not yet seen what you eventually discovered. This is not meant to judge the new partner. It simply reflects where they are in their own emotional journey. It is very similar to where you once stood. They are filled with hope. They believe in love. They trust easily and often mistake warning signs for passion and excitement. Narcissists usually do not choose partners because of healthy compatibility. They choose people who are emotionally unprepared to recognize manipulation. They are drawn to those who still believe the fantasy, who are touched by charm, and who have not yet learned to separate real love from emotional control. The new partner is not better than you. They simply believe they are beginning a beautiful love story, instead of realizing they have entered a cycle that slowly drains their emotional energy. They believe the compliments. They believe the promises. They believe the overwhelming attention. What they do not yet realize is that these behaviors often serve as tools for control instead of expressions of lasting love. They cannot yet see the subtle emotional dependency forming beneath the surface. They do not notice how quickly admiration can turn into disappointment once they begin expressing their own needs, setting healthy boundaries, or showing their true personality. This is why the narcissist seems deeply attached in the beginning. It is not because the connection is stronger. It is because the illusion feels safe once again. The performance is working. The mask still appears believable. Keep watching because what happens next follows the same pattern almost every time. As time passes, reality slowly begins to appear. Just as it eventually did for you, the new partner starts noticing small cracks beneath the surface. They feel confused by mixed signals. They notice promises that never become actions. Emotional exhaustion quietly replaces excitement. Little by little, they begin asking themselves the same questions you once asked. Why does everything feel different now? Why does love suddenly feel conditional? Why does nothing I do seem to be enough anymore? The truth always finds its way to the surface, because no illusion can survive forever. It cannot survive when real life demands honesty, accountability, and emotional consistency. Eventually, the human heart recognizes the difference between genuine love and carefully managed appearances. Once you understand that narcissists often choose people who have not yet recognized these patterns, it becomes much easier to understand why their relationships follow the same empty cycle again and again. They are not building something new, they are repeating something familiar. And that leads to another important truth. A narcissist does not truly build lasting partnerships. They build a stage where their ego can continue performing. This next part is important, so don't miss it. From the outside, everything may look like a happy relationship. There are smiling photographs, romantic words, public displays of affection, and moments that seem full of love. But underneath those appearances, something very different is often happening. There is no solid foundation built on mutual trust, shared growth, or equal emotional investment. Instead of creating a healthy relationship, the narcissist creates a stage where they can perform, impress others, receive admiration, and avoid being challenged. The new partner believes they are entering a meaningful relationship filled with hope and possibility. Meanwhile, the narcissist quietly writes the script. They place themselves at the center of every scene. They assign roles to everyone around them. Without realizing it, the other person becomes someone whose main purpose is to admire, comfort, praise, and support the image the narcissist wants to protect. This explains why the beginning feels so powerful. Narcissists often know exactly how to create exciting beginnings, emotional highs, unforgettable gestures, and moments that seem almost magical. But no performance can continue forever. Eventually, everyday life arrives, bringing honesty, vulnerability, compromise, and responsibility. These are the very things that expose the limits of the narcissist's emotional world. Once the partner begins asking for something real, the performance starts falling apart. Criticism replaces admiration. Distance replaces closeness. Punishment replaces understanding. The stage lights slowly fade because the script no longer works the way it once did. The moment you recognize that the relationship was built more like a performance than a partnership, another powerful truth becomes impossible to ignore. Every stage needs someone willing to keep acting. The healed person quietly walks away, while the person who is not yet healed becomes the next character in the same familiar story. This may be one of the hardest truths to accept, but it is also one of the most freeing. The moment you began healing, questioning unhealthy patterns, and refusing to react the way they expected, you stepped off their stage completely. You left the role they had created for you. Without someone willing to continue playing the part, the performance could no longer continue. Healing is what opens the exit door. It usually happens slowly, through moments of clarity, painful tears, difficult realizations, and quiet decisions that slowly break the illusion apart. Day after day, you begin recognizing manipulation where you once saw passion. You begin seeing emotional instability where you once believed there was mystery. You stop confusing control with care and intensity with genuine love. That transformation changes everything. It is the reason you are no longer trapped inside someone else's story. You are finally writing your own. And once that happens, there is no reason to return to a stage that was never built for real love in the first place.